Okay, so now that we have figured out how to inspect our array up here, if the form is actually sent, then we can also do some more stuff, right? We can check to see if post is it has certain keys, if those keys aren't empty, and so forth. Because here's the other problem with that form, is that let's just go back to the form as it is now, and let's say that someone hits the submit button, all right, while nothing is chosen. Well, we get an empty value, and we don't want that either, okay? So one of the other things that you would want to be able to do is go up here and say, all right, well, we need to check to see if the key is empty. Because remember, it was the key of engines. If you look down below, it's this key of engines, you know, where we have an array option that's these dashes, it's the default option with an empty value, okay? So we want to see if the key that's being sent has an empty value. So where it says if not empty post, we want to put another logical operator of and, which is the two ampersands, and then say if not empty, and then we're going to do the post, and we're going to choose the specific key of engines, because we don't want the engines, and don't forget to close that last parenthesis, we don't want the engines key to have an empty value, because that means that somebody submitted it with the dashes, all right, without an actual value. So let's save that and let's go back here, reload this form so that it's blank like this, okay? And then let's try submitting it with this empty value, and you see nothing happens. I don't get that inspection any longer. So that's good. I only get it if I submit something that is legitimate, okay? And you can sit here and do this till the cows come home. And then if I go here and submit nothing again, it resets the form for me, which is good. All right, so one of the other things that I wanted to show you is that you can also do something else that's kind of interesting. If you want to see the difference between post and get, then we can just change some of these values that say post and change them to get. And here's the first thing that you'd have to do is go down here in the form, okay, and I want you to change the method to the word get. All right, and now if you come back up in the top here where it says if empty post, you're just going to change the word post to get. Let's do that. And I'm just going to copy this so that I can change it in each of these instances. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then if I come back over here, I'm just going to reload the form by clicking like that. And let's just pick something. And then what you're going to see is that it's actually inspecting the element just like I told it to. However, look what it also is doing. It's also putting a bunch of information up here in the URL. And the way that it does it is that it has this query mark. This little question mark is referred to as a query mark. And it goes at the end of the file name. And then anything after the query mark is going to be any kind of submitted key value pairs. And so in this case, the word engines is our key, and it's saying the engines key equals, and then it gives me the value for that engines key right here. And you see it's got like these special encodings. These are URL encodings, and they're the kinds of encoding that come after the query mark. So the kind of encoding, this is a weird thing, but the kind of encoding that comes before the query mark in a URL is one kind of encoding, and anything that comes after that query mark is a whole different kind of encoding. So anyway, this %3 capital A, right, and then you see again, that's gonna, well, that's gonna be a colon, %3 capital A, and then %2 capital F is gonna be a / because you see it presented twice here. Anyway, so, but you can see, and then there's an ampersand, well, that's gonna be another item. So every time you see an ampersand like this after a query mark somewhere, it means that it's preparing you for the next key value pair. In this case, it's submit equals submit. And so this is really helpful to know. This is one of the reasons why it's so important that you don't submit passwords and stuff in the clear in forms. You want to make sure that those forms are going to be encrypted. Like whenever you go to something and it says HTTP versus HTTPS, well, HTTPS is going to be an encrypted layer so that it doesn't get passed in what's referred to as clear text like this, where anybody could read it up in the URL. In fact, they could even bookmark your password and username, for instance, if you're going to a form that has, you know, unencrypted stuff. Now, that's still going to be true with the post method. Just because you can't see it up in the URL doesn't mean that someone can't get it. I mean, you saw how easy it was for us to inspect the element and go down here to networks or network, and then, you know, here, let's submit the form again, and then you can see how simple it is to look at the form data. And see, no longer is it called form post information, it's called query string parameters, because it's using the get method. And if you look at the view decoded, this is decoded, whereas if you look at the URL encoding, it shows you all that nonsense that's up here, okay? And then you can also view the source and so forth. All right. Anyway, so that being said, let's go back to our form, because I don't really want it to be in the form of a get statement. But what you could do in some cases is, you know, you could pass information where it would send info to the next page so that you can use this literally to navigate. You know, you can use your navigation this way. Anyway, so I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to undo all those changes. That's going to be the easiest way for me to do it. So I'm going to save that again. I can just double check, make sure that in fact when I submit this thing that I get the post. And you see I don't have all that URL encoding anymore up here because I switched it back to post. So that's good. That's what I want. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to show you not how to just print R. All right, that's not my goal really, is to print R. My goal is going to be so that I can have this redirect somewhere. So what I want to do is I need to take this information, all right, where it says if the post of engines isn't empty, I want to be able to store that. So I'm actually going to just comment this out where it says print our post. I'm going to comment that out. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of these pre-tags. That's really, really important. And I'll explain to you later why it's so important, other than it's just a good practice anyway to not have a bunch of pre-tags before the doc type. So I'm going to comment out this, and in fact, I'll just come up here and I'm going to store this address into a variable because I want to be able to reuse it. All right, so I'm going to copy the post of engines and I'm going to store it in a variable called address, and we'll make the address equal, like I said, the post of engines, okay? And the next thing that I can do is I can use this thing called a header redirection. So the header function is going to pass, literally it's going to pass a header. And you might have noticed, like over here, let me just, before I save any of this, I want to have this form resubmit. Let me go down here and I'm going to inspect the element, and I want to show you how if you go to network and let's submit something in this form, and you'll notice that if I click on my submission, you'll notice that it's got all of these headers. There are these things called headers that get sent. And this is really important because the headers give the page all sorts of information about either what it's supposed to do, or, you know, what other kinds of really important data is coming with it, like what the content type is and all this stuff. And headers get sent at the very beginning of the page. And one of the things that if you ever see something that says, you know, basically there's a fatal error, headers have already been sent, then the problem is that the page actually started to render, and then you tried to send another header after the page had started to render. And you can't really do that, not unless you do something a little bit more advanced called output buffering, and we're not going to get into that right now. But up here, I'm going to do header, and then there is an option that you can have for header, and you have to, I need to put this in double quotes because I'm going to be using a variable inside of it. And so you have to say, and it has to be uppercase, location, and then a colon, and this is where you would put a pathway. Like you could put an absolute path of some sort, or you could also put a relative pathway, you know, like .. or something like that. I'm not going to do that. I want to use my engine's redirection where it takes me to http://google.com or something. And so because I am in double quotes, I need to best practice use curly braces around my address variable. Okay, and so what it's going to do is it's going to tell it, hey, header redirect to address, and then on the very next line I need to do something. I need to exit. All right, so because it's a header, I need to make sure that the page properly exits so that it can move on to the new page where we're about to send it. Okay, this is really important, and you have to have the syntax correct. So I'm going to hit save here, and we're going to go back over here, and let's just reload this page without submitting anything. And I want you to also, if you want, you don't have to, but I'm going to keep my network thing open here, and you'll see what happens whenever I choose like oldest brother. I click on it, submit, and you see what's happening with all of these headers, and you see that it's also saying waiting for yahoo.com, and for some reason my page is having a long time loading. There we go. Finally, it loaded. And you see all this other stuff that's going on. It's a ton of stuff that happens when you load yahoo.com. But you could see that it came from a post, and then as soon as it went to the redirection, you see it used that redirect. That's what that header is. It found it, and then it started loading the Yahoo page, and all this other crap loads when you go to Yahoo. All right, that's going to be the same for Google too. So let's choose Big Brother this time. Hit submit, and it's the same principle. It loads the page, and then you can see all these other requests that are going on. Okay, and what's really important is that it took me there. Okay, but I just wanted to show you that. So that's actually working now. It's actually redirecting me properly. I want to show you what happens, however, though, if I put a space before this PHP. Just a space, that's all it takes. I want to save that. I want to go back to my form here. Let's hit the back button. And I'm going to just let it load properly just from the blank page. And then let's choose something. Let's choose Bing, I guess. And I hit submit. And, well, it actually worked. Sometimes it won't work. Yeah, so just be aware that whenever you do something like have a space or a break tag or anything that comes before you send a header in a file, possibly the newer browsers are better at recognizing that discrepancy, but in older browsers, this would have resulted in a fatal error. And so if you are doing some stuff and then you realize that you're getting these weird errors that say, hey, headers have already been sent or whatever, then one of the first things that you need to double check is to see that there's not a single empty space or white space or a word or anything before that opening PHP tag before you're about to send a header. And like this doesn't count because all you're doing is setting a variable, and of course this doesn't count because it's part of the conditional statement and stuff. But like you shouldn't do something like try to print R before you send a header, for instance, because it's actually trying to send something or render something to the page. It's a really bad practice, and very often it can cause you problems. So anyway, that is the way that you could build a form, for something that does like a redirection, to another page. Okay, and there are lots of other ways that you can play around with this. I encourage you to, and let me know if you have any questions.